saw him up close, like, what does that route tree look like? What routes is he comfortable running? We know that he's going to be dangerous on jet sweeps and smoke screens and manufactured touches. And there's a lot of smart ways you could use him. You can line him up, running back, throw him screen from out wide, get him in motion. But what sort of conventional routes is he comfortable running? If he's going to be regularly lining up in the slot with Garrett Wilson on the outside and Mike Williams on the outside. And there's probably going to be looks where they want him on the outside with Garrett Wilson in the slot to help free him up. So it's good that Rodgers is excited about the pick. I'm sure we'll get some video of them throwing together over the summer somewhere. That feels inevitable, which is exciting. And, we'll save it for another pod. But as much as we like the pick, we both feel like they still need another meaningful addition or some type of addition at wide receiver. We moved into day 3. We were in our text chat day 3 for Badlands and just laughing at the chaos in the similar way that we were with Discord, with all the trade ups and trade downs. Board movement aside, and we're all happy they have 2 3s next year, because that's going to be useful ammo at the trade deadline, and useful ammo, even if they don't use it for that, just to have that many picks gives you flexibility. The 2 running backs, the all creatine team, as you dubbed it on War Room. We really have Allen. So we liked Izzy. I find it very hard to be convinced that if the coaching staff was excited about Izzy, they would draft 2 running backs the next year. And we know this team drafts a lot of running backs, like an insane amount of running backs, and most have not worked out except for Breece Hall. What is the roster management plan here? And what is the utilization plan? I don't think it's crazy to think the Jets would carry 4 halfbacks. I'm not a believer that Nick Bawden, needs a roster spot. Use Ruckert as your fullback. Use Ruckert as your H-back. I don't necessarily think Davis or Allen are ever going to play fullback. We've gotten questions to that effect. That's a different type of thing. But, can you do the pony look? Is there other different things that you can do that get 2 backs in the field at the same time? Breece is obviously a really good pass catcher, and they should use him in the slot more frequently. What is going to be the plan here? And are Izzy's days numbered, or are we reading into that too much?
It's an interesting question, because I was surprisingly caught off guard by this. I think because I was more focused on their other needs. There was good corners on the board, and we think as a podcast they're going to let Reed walk and pay Carter and Sauce. You never know how negotiations can go and how you could pivot. Maybe we're wrong. And they didn't really get aggressive in that way. Now, to put a bow on Corley, who I could tie into this creatine draft, I feel like a lot of people are probably rightfully in their heads going, well, they tried a lot of those things with Elijah Moore and it didn't work. They did try a lot of those things with Elijah Moore. And if you remember correctly, Malachi Corley is 215 pounds and is pound for pound instantly like one of the strongest players of the Jets offense. I mean, he's just muscle on top of muscle that translates to the tape. Elijah Moore at the combine was 178 pounds. Malachi Corley is safely 40 pounds heavier than Elijah Moore.
That's insane.
Right, because he's only an inch and a half taller. So, and they did try those things with Elijah Moore, and very early on, I believe he got concussed and banged up, and it just felt like they got a little away from that with Moore, and they started making him an outside wide receiver, and he wasn't that. And the NFL is a brutal sport. And I'm not saying Elijah Moore is not going to be a good NFL player. He hasn't lived up to expectations at all, either with the Jets or the Browns. But if you are a shorter, not smaller guy, and Corley's very different. Corley has 32 and an 1/8 inch arms. Like, those are long arms for a guy that's 5'11". He's just not tall. He's 5'11". So if you're going to be that guy that plays underneath and gets the ball quickly and takes a lot of hits, like, you got to be able to take the hits. And a lot of teams draft these guys, and then after 3 weeks up in the NFL, they're like, damn, like, he's beat up already. I think that's why Corley was loved in that way. And rightfully so. A lot of people have gone, back and said, like, man, maybe Rodgers viewed him as his new Cobb. And once again, Corley's bigger than Cobb. So I think that's really important to remember, or if you're looking for reasons to buy into Corley being more effective in that role than the Jets trying that with Moore. Now, when you look at day 3, I mean, I've already discussed the grading of this draft and how I feel about it and all that stuff. I thought they got a little cute on day 3. I really like getting the Lions 3rd rounder next year. That was a savvy move. Whether there's a million avenues you can go with that. That's a trade asset for the trade deadline. That's a trade asset where you could package your threes and go back into round 2 next year. There are so many different avenues you could go. Just having an extra 3 is really good business to move out of round 4. Moving out of round 4 for the sake of moving out of round 4, which is what they did at pick 111, was just odd business. I always make the joke to people, but it's really not a joke. It just feels like the Jets in their war room are missing the 23-year-old out of Harvard or Yale with the chart, and they just look at him and he just holds up yes or no with the signs. Like this is not a deal that equates to the proper value. And that's and the Lions deal was like they traded a late 4 in this draft to get a future 3. That's good business. They just dumped 111 for really not any return. When they had, there was interesting players on the board at that point. There was a couple corners like DeCamari and Richardson, I thought was an interesting player. Devontae Walker's a deep threat wide receiver that the Ravens took 2 picks after that. That's a more traditional wide receiver. Tanner Bortolini is a center guard that would have been an interesting backup. I mean, this is nitpicking, but it's just something that I wouldn't have done personally. So then you look at the running backs. Everything the Jets have done this offseason has shown you they want to be a more gap scheme, downhill, punch you in the face running football team. The signing of Simpson, the addition of Morgan Moses were 2 huge indicators of that. And then they draft Braylon Allen, whose best tape was 2022 when Wisconsin was a gap scheme run team. When you look at even the other running back that they took in Isaiah Davis, who comes out of the FCS, and quite frankly, at the FCS level, he was good at every single scheme that South Dakota State ran. But when you project a guy that's, 6'1", 225 pounds, he's a downhill physical runner. That's not really what they drafted Abanikanda to be. And you look at Brees is just so gifted, it doesn't matter what scheme he's in. But Abanikanda is like outside zone gas, right? The Jets have really turned the page from the LaFleur era, where everything was, Berrios and Moore, really tiny slots. All their backs they were trying to utilize out, like Michael Carter's so small. They just like these outside zone or inside zone kind of runners. They've changed the identity of the team, and we're going to see if it works. Ultimately, I think when you believe you're playing with a lead because they have Aaron Rodgers back, the 2 things you should try to do is be a physical downhill running team and rush the absolute fuck out of the passer. And that's what the Jets are built to do right now. Even getting rid of JFM, which not a great move, right? It's a move because they have so much dead money on the books. They had to get rid of a good player. That's not good business. And getting a 6th rounder in 2026 back for him is awful return. But on the flip side of it, if you're telling me to pick between Hassan Reddick and JFM, and I guess Reddick is more of the Bryce Huff replacement, the Jets feel like they could be a lighter front more often because they think they're finally playing with the lead. Now, if it blows up in their face, obviously that's not great because last year it did. Rodgers got hurt. The Jets were losing a lot. But this year, the roster is constructed where they should be playing with leads. And I do think they'll have more opportunity to be a lighter front at times. And that kind of fits the DNA of the team. So, yeah, I mean, the thing I've screamed for years, and this drove me nuts about the end of the Maccagnan era. It drove me insane about the Gase era that also crossed over with Douglas, is this team had no identity. They weren't big. They weren't small. They weren't really that fast. They weren't really that slow, but they definitely weren't fast. They didn't really know what kind of fronts and coverages they always wanted to be in. They have a hell of a defensive identity under Saleh and Ulbrich. And now it feels like with Rodgers here, even at his age, the offense knows what they finally want to be.
Yeah, I think there's an identity there. They've had the identity on defense. Now you have the identity on offense. Theoretically, it has to all come together and be executed. But
pieces are there.
The pieces are there. And you have the personnel to be a certain style of team and also have an offense that protects Aaron Rodgers a little bit and doesn't put it all on him for 17 games at 41 years old coming off a major injury. There's going to be weeks where against certain teams, the Jets should be able to run the ball like 35 times and just kick the crap out of teams on both sides of the ball and wear them down and have Rodgers just work in the short passing game. Let Brees break tackles, let Corley break tackles, let Allen break tackles, let Garrett break tackles. And
they don't want Rodgers touched.
Yeah.
Quick game,
this could be easy.
Running.
Quick release, hurry up to the line if you want, check, quick release, one step, and just keep it moving. They have the personnel to do that if Hackett could stay out of the way. if Keith Carter could stay out of the way. If Rodgers is really going to be driving this thing, it's an interesting collection of offensive talent. And they finally have some of the physicality up front on the offensive line to protect these skill position players. Now, we look at day 3. Let's talk about the quarterback. Were you surprised with their developmental quarterback pick? And what is a pragmatic expect? I always feel like with these day 3 quarterbacks, every fan base, and Jet fans are guilty of this too, you draft any quarterback between round 4 and round 7, it's like he's going to sit for a year or two, and he's going to be a starter. He's the guy, just like that. We got him, and like he'll sit for 2 years, and it's like it usually doesn't work out that way. Now, I don't watch the most college football, but I feel like saying that if there wasn't an injury concern, this was a first or second round pick feels like a reach to me. Feels like maybe it was like a 3rd round pick, but he dropped to the 5th, 6th round
he was not a
area because, so he's not going to play this year, right? They're going to find a creative way to put him on IR. Most likely, we don't even know like when he's going to be able to practice. Like, so what is the best case scenario here for him as the long-term guy? Is he? What's your thoughts and what's your pro comp for him? What's the best case scenario here?
To me, I thought this was down to Pratt and Jordan Travis. And I thought Pratt would go at the end of the 3rd round, and the Jets were not going to use pick 72 on Pratt, clearly. And that they would just end up taking Travis if they were going to take one. And then ultimately they took Travis over Pratt, which tells me they really valued his mobility in the evaluation process. And Pratt fell a little further than I expected. Now, the best case scenario to me with Travis is that he ends up being Tyrod Taylor. Like, honestly, that's how I look at it, which is why I love them being in the same quarterback room. I do think people do get, out in front of their skis, like you just said, when a guy is drafted in the 3rd to 5th round who's really well liked and was a really good college player, and they go like, well, he's going to be the guy one day. If Jordan Travis is a capable backup, this is a massive win. And I think Jordan Travis can be a capable backup. He is not the biggest guy. He doesn't have the biggest arm, but he's mobile. He's pretty accurate. He throws with touch. He is extremely well liked, and he was very clutch in college. And if he doesn't get hurt, Florida State ends up in the college football playoff, and who knows what happens from there. So he's just not as physically gifted as these guys that go in the 1st round, right? Like, he's not the same runner Jaden Daniels was. He's not as big as Drake May with this howitzer of an arm like Penix. So no, he wasn't going in the 1st round. Could it say Florida State won a game in the college football playoff? Could he have gone in the 3rd round? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I like the pick because, one, they kind of did something that I can't remember them doing in a while, where they drafted not only a 4-year starter that's won a lot of games, that's really well liked, but also has some mobility where the league is going, where it feels like every quarterback nowadays has mobility. He had 7 rushing touchdowns all 4 years he was a starter. Every single year he was a starter, he had 7 rushing touchdowns. So it's just really funny. And